So actually we are, it's all right for me to start now?
Yes.
We are standing now actually in the western part of the building, the western triclinium. You have to understand that when we started the excavation, everything was filled up with soil. They just filled up everything to the top. And as we started unearthing, the excavation was directed by Alexander On of the Authority of Antiquities, Israeli Authority at the late. He's a very good friend of mine and colleague, and I replaced him afterwards and continued the excavations now. As he started excavating, all of a sudden, we saw that the walls that are revealed, we came from up, as archaeologists. So the walls that are revealed are decorated in the same fashion as the other triclinium in the eastern side that we already knew, because it was opened from the late 19th century and from the 70s of the 20th century. So we realized that it was the same building, the same structure. And today, when everything is open, it's easier to realize that actually we are speaking about a very big building that is about 24 meters from east to west. And this 24 meters is divided into three main parts. Western triclinium, where we stand now, Western assembly room, where banquets, where feasts, where people gathered around the walls, leaning on sofas and holding all kind of symposia and drinking and eating and having good time. In the west, this is the Western triclinium, where we stand right now, which went several changes afterwards, and I will tell you soon. This is why we don't see it in such a good state of preservation as triclinium, while the Eastern triclinium, where we visited before, is in a better state of preservation because at least the floor level exists and you see the decoration of the walls and you see it in a better state of preservation, so you understand. And in between the Western triclinium, where we stand now, and the Eastern one, was a fountain where water flowed from the wall, from the Corinthian capitals that adorned the walls. Now, this room actually shows to the visitor the several phases of construction and the hectic construction, I would say, because they never stopped. They only built and built and built and changed the plans and replanned, and several changes that happened in the Second Temple period. They even did not finish to build this magnificent building with triclinium and fountain, or only used it for a few years, and everything changed. And they took this huge building, canceled the fountain, divided the space into three separate halls, inserted a huge ritual bath in this one, and other water installations in the other rooms. So what do we see here in this specific room? We see that the original Herodian floor of the triclinium is missing. No floor anymore. Instead of floor, there is a deep, stepped installation that we identify as a ritual bath of the Second Temple period, that we unearthed only half of it. If we would have continued the excavation all along the wall, we would continue to see this staircase that goes all along the room. But we haven't done it because we wanted to leave some remains of later periods that were built on top of it.
So this room used to look like that room?
Exactly the same.
And then they dug down
Exactly.
and they made it a mikveh?
Exactly.
So they would have come here first and done a mikveh and then gone into that room and then gone to the Temple Mount?
But we see that in order to make the mikveh, they ruined the original beautiful decoration. How do I see it? First of all, there is no floor. Then I see the walls with all this small knocking in order to put the plaster of the ritual bath. So this is the way. First was the magnificent building, and then someone came, dismantled the floor, dismantled the northern enclosing wall. There is no wall here. When we stood in the Eastern triclinium, you saw three walls of the triclinium. Here you see only two, only the Western and the Eastern. The one in the north was dismantled already in the Second Temple period. Also in the south, we don't have the closing wall because here a Roman period building cut and changed everything. But to the north, these small vaults and the wall above them and everything is still Second Temple period. And maybe it is even earlier to our building, But the wall that enclosed the triclinium is missing. I see remains of its existence. I can prove you it existed. I see here the corner of the pilaster, but the corner is cut by this vault. And I see on the other side exactly the same. So as an archaeologist, I can say, when I have to reconstruct the, we call it stratigraphy, the development of the building and the different phases, I would say, in the very beginning, that I haven't spoken about it yet at all, in the very, very beginning, which is sometimes at the 1st century BCE, possibly King Herod, there was a huge wall serving as a dam wall across two main rivers that the meeting place is nearby here. One is a very big valley that comes from Damascus Gate, goes all the way to the Silwan Pool. It is called the Tyropeon Valley. Another one is a transversal valley that comes from the area of Jaffa Gate today in the west and goes into the Tyropeon. When these two rivers that carried a lot of water during winters in Jerusalem, I don't know if you live in Jerusalem also in winters and you know the amount of water, when landscape is without buildings, the amount of water that are flowing in the rivers is huge. There had to be they had to build a very massive dam wall in order to stop and control the water. And this is the earliest thing we found here. And
it's great, go ahead.
How about this? Can you do this? Can you do this?
So while he's running away, let me just ask you, do we know anything about this mikveh? Is there anything that you can describe that's unique about it?
First of all, we were surprised to find it. We found coins inside the plaster that can date the construction. And the coins are from between 54 and 58 CE. So we know that it's quite late in the Second Temple period because we end the Second Temple period in the destruction of Jerusalem at 70 CE. Jerusalem was destroyed. There is no more Jewish life, Jewish city existing. And this mikveh, ritual bath, is just a couple of years before that was installed. Now, what is the meaning of all this? We asked ourselves. And it's very hard. You must understand that also the study of the remains is still going on. It's not that I have answers to everything. I can just describe you the finds and suggest explanations. The way we understand the things took place here was that actually, and now I will go back also to the very beginning, in the very beginning, which is actually possibly late 1st century BCE, a control of the water took place by this huge dam wall that was built across the rivers. And everything that was constructed later is later to this wall, including our building. Our building already leans against this wall and is also built on top of this wall. There's several questions. But our building, once it was built along the main road that went to the Temple Mount from the west. Which Temple Mount? The Temple Mount of King Herod or Herodian, or the Hasmonean Temple Mount that antedated possibly the pre-Herodian, smaller Hasmonean Temple Mount. There was a road that went from the west climbing, and our building was built along this road. And it was a building for the elite of the city, for the city councillors, for the rulers, a meeting place of them, a place where they could host their important guests and offer them meals and offer them drinks and hold speaks and talks just before climbing with them up to the Temple Mount. So this was a really magnificent building. But soon after, possibly when King Herod decided to enlarge the Temple Mount, and when the enlargement of the Temple Mount took place, what brings us already to the 1st century CE, when the Temple Mount was enlarged and the western wall was built only 20 meters away from this building, everything changed. The building was not functioning anymore as this Prytaneum or magnificent building but for something else. It was divided into 3 separate halls, water installations were installed inside, and it was still used for public use, but we don't know exactly what.
So this predated the Western Wall.
At least the
Short
beginning,
answer,
yes.
Short answer.
Yes, at least we might change our mind tomorrow, because it's very dangerous to say such a thing, because the date of the building is only the 20th or 30th of the 1st century CE. I know it now because I was able to lift original paving stones of the building and have sealed material from below the flagstones. This is why archaeologists date. I have coins, I have potsherds, I have carbon-14 dates. Everything puts me in the first half of the 1st century CE. To say that this is earlier than the enlargement of the Herodian Temple Mount that we think that King Herod might have started, and King Herod died at 4 BCE, and this building started being built at 20 AD, makes a problem. So we have to search for the solution, which we don't have yet. There might be all kinds of phases of construction. King Herod might have initiated the process of enlarging the Temple Mount. Things have started, but things were not finalized in King Herod's time. Things were not finalized until the destruction of the city at 70 AD, as we know in other places. But here, they took place possibly mainly afterwards, mainly in the last decades of the Second Temple period, between the 30s and the 70s of the 1st century, the things were finalized. It could be that things started earlier. It could be that the enlargement of the Temple Mount started even before the construction of the building, but it stopped, and then other things continued. It's like you must think, someone told me, think about the Rakevet Kala, how you call it in Jerusalem.
The light rail.
Or in Tel Aviv today. Everyone digs and then stops and then goes to another place and then remembers he forgot to do something and comes back and changes. And every new city mayor or someone changes a little bit the plans, and everyone wants to influence and everyone wants to put his flag and say, I did it, I enlarged, I built, they possibly put signs with, I contributed the money.
So there's nothing new under the sun.
Nothing new. No, not in Jerusalem. Not in Jerusalem. This is what archaeology teaches us. To be more patient to what goes on today, because it always had been like that in the last 5,000 years. Jerusalem was always very important, very holy, everyone wanted to affect.
I have a question.
It's fascinating.
The mikveh you said is the largest found in Jerusalem?
To the best of my knowledge, 7 meters wide mikveh. I don't know another.
And they're
ritual
building
bath.
this right before the destruction of the temple. So you would think.
Last decades, I wouldn't.
So at this point, they had no clue that there was going to be a destruction, because
Of course,
clearly they're
possible.
continuing to build these magnificent structures.
One of the suggestions was that maybe, because we see this mikveh and we see also other ritual baths in the area, and the impression is that maybe in the 4 years of the big revolt between 66 and 70s, the Jews, Jerusalem was always suffering from not enough water. Mm-hmm. So it's like they inserted water reservoirs, water pools, ritual baths anywhere. So, and we have a coin of between 54 to 59 in the plaster of the staircase. So it's the last decades of the Second Temple period, but I cannot rule out even the suggestion that maybe this ritual bath, although it's very wide, was as many other ritual baths all over and were installed only during the big revolt between 66 and 70, when maybe they hoped that Jerusalem would survive, but at least the situation was not very good anymore. I can tell you that the division of the building into 3 separate halls, the cancellation of the fountain, the cancellation of the big, nice banquet hall, and was few decades before 70, when they did not know yet that the city is going to be destroyed, and possibly when this Temple Mount was enlarged, Wilson Arch constructed, and the whole area went in overhaul of plans and buildings. But the installation of the ritual bath might be later. So it's difficult.
Two things. First of all, what, is this a place that Jesus might have walked, that Jesus might have been? Is it how would it relate to him? I know the other man asked you about corruption or something.
Yes, because we know that on top of the Temple Mount, he, over the tables of the money changers, but at least the way I understand it is that this describes on top of the Temple Mount, which must have been a holy place, and he was frustrated to see all the non-holy things that took place on top of the Temple Mount. By the way, this is also why visitors that were also pagans and not Jews could visit the Temple Mount. They could come to a certain place where there was a fence, the soreg, that enclosed the holy area, but other than that, they could wander around. So, if Jesus was a guest of the city councilors of Jerusalem at that time, he could. He was crucified around the 30s. This building was built between the 20s and the 30s. So the building existed then. And the building was a place to host the elite, the elite. So who knows?
Okay.
I'm not so sure he was considered to be such an honor, but who knows? Who knows? Everything is possible.
Okay. And just like in 2 sentences, tell me how important this discovery is, and to you, what it means to you.
As an archaeologist that investigates the history and archaeology of Jerusalem, this is a very important thing. It contributes a lot to our knowledge, because this is one of the first times that we were able to go down comparatively in a big area, very close to the Temple Mount, and study about the very several phases of construction that came one after the other in the late Second Temple period and onwards. The buildings still stand. The walls, look at the impressiveness of the construction. It is obvious that the ones who built it did it with money of the rulers of the city, maybe of the king of the city. It's not a private construction. And there's so many several phases, one after the other, teach us about this, the important place. So this is why when we excavated it and we saw that it's one thing and another thing, and we have 16 layers. When we speak in archaeology, stratigraphy speaks. We say, how do we know it's a complex place? Because we have 16 layers that are dated from the earliest phase that we found, which is the 1st century BCE. We never reached bedrock here. We don't know where is bedrock, how deep is it below us, and what other things are below us. But until now, from the 20th century, our days, or 21st century, to the 1st century BCE, we have 16 layers, that each layer indicates a new structure that is being built, and possibly the destruction of earlier things or reuse of earlier things. So the area is very active, and it teaches us a lot about the history and archaeology of Jerusalem. So it's a wonderful thing. And the state of preservation of the building itself, of the triclinium as you called it, is a wonderful thing. It shows us actually about the everyday life of the elites, of the high society, as of the rulers, of the leaders of the city of Jerusalem, of Herodian Jerusalem in the 1st century CE. It's wonderful. I wish we would find more things.
And how did you think? How did you feel when you found this, or when you?
You have to understand that as an archaeologist, you don't find it all of a sudden. You find something. It's years of work, and you go very, very slowly from up, and everything was filled up with soil, which is, and then you see the later stuff, which was 9th, 10th centuries potsherds, early Islamic potsherds that filled up everything, indicating that the surface of city was much above, and it was sort of a garbage area where they just threw everything. And then you go down and down, and you find remains of the late Byzantine, early Umayyad, early Islamic periods, all kind of industrial installations. And then you go further down, and you see the feel of the late Roman period after the destruction of Jerusalem that filled up the ritual bath, filled up everything around, leveled the area, and only then you see the monumentality of the building. So of course, and then also speaking about the excavation, when Alexander On, the late Alexander On that carried here the excavations, he came from above, because first we excavated on the upper level. And when we saw this room, which was the first thing to be revealed in the new excavations, we were excited because we realized what was not known then, that we are actually in the parallel room of the Hasmonean or Herodian hall that was already known since Warren's time, since the 19th century. We realized that what we suspected before was actually going or taking place. This is one big building. We still did not know the surprise that we were to find out when we saw the fountain and the water reservoir in between the two triclinium. So actually our enthusiasm and excitement and questions, and while you unearth such a thing, you have thousands of questions. I have only very, very small number of answers to the so many questions I still have. And also, your conclusions change. As an archaeologist, you must be very open-minded and be ready for the new discoveries. Because as they called me once again to continue Alexander's excavations and to dismantle here, enlarge the openings and dismantle parts of the walls in order to allow the passage, and we unearthed the original flagstones that we had also to lift them and then put them back in place, but lift them and continue the excavation down, it gave me new data. These coins, potsherds, carbon-14, we found remains of a huge drainage system, part of the urban draining canals that goes all the way to the city of David today. We know it, its continuation to the south, running just below us, more than 4 meters below. So actually, as an archaeologist, you keep on finding new things and you keep on searching for explanations. So it's not one thing at a time, but it's a holy thing. But as a whole, if I have to summarize it, it's a big excitement because the new things that were added to our knowledge in the last 2 decades, I would say, in the research of Jerusalem are contributing tremendous information. We still don't, we are still working on it. Under Wilson Arch in the excavations, a new theater like Odeon, possibly Bouleuterion of the Roman period, but what was there in the Second Temple period? Several questions that are so, a lot of excavations that are really contributing a lot of information to the research, historical and archaeological research of Jerusalem. And this is fascinating.
Yeah. Thank you.